This third Sunday of Advent is, in more ways than one, a transition time in our season of Advent. First of all, we light the pink candle, marking the halfway mark, the halfway point in our journey through Advent. And likewise, we wear corresponding vestments, although many of you have heard me say time and time again, real men do not wear pink. And alpha males do not wear rose. I figured, how would John Wayne put it? These are salmon-colored vestments. Okay? And it's meant to mark the joy of being halfway through this journey through Advent as we move closer now to the celebration of Christmas. But this year, in particular, we reach a transition in virtue of the fact that we're celebrating this day on December 17th, in which we now enter into the octave of Christmas. Which means now, even though perhaps since Thanksgiving we have been wishing with a certain abandon Merry Christmas to the people we've encountered, starting today we can actually wish them Merry Christmas with impunity. Because the first few days of Advent we're focusing not on Christmas but on the Eschaton, the second coming of Christ. And now, starting on the 17th and during this octave of Christmas, the daily Mass readings leading into Christmas focus on preparing to celebrate the first coming of Jesus. So, Merry Christmas, at least at this stage of Advent. But it also shows how we as a church, in the midst of all the hustle and bustle of the Christmas season in our nation, and I have to speak to the trend that many people say that this nation really doesn't have a Christmas season because we think of it in terms of Advent and Christmas. Our country, in fact, does have a Christmas season. They call it the holiday season, but let's face it, it's centered on Christmas, so it's the Christmas season. And it's a time in which our focus does shift, in which we are preparing to enter into the celebration of Christmas and the sacred holidays of this era. Our Jewish brethren just wrapped up Hanukkah last week. But all this happens at this particular time. But the nation, in fact, does celebrate this to a certain degree. I mean, of course, they say it's a commercialist type of focus that's at the supermarket you're looking at for the sales, and it's all commercial. But, folks, let's face it. It's a time in which people exercise a great deal of generosity, which is a good thing. And they got to get their presents from somewhere. And the people who sell them need to make their living some way. And it's a time in which our generosity really boosts the economy of this country and boosts the businesses that provide the gifts that we give. And in many ways we psych ourselves up with that time of generosity in this season that begins with Thanksgiving and pretty much ends with New Year's. So it begins with a parade in New York and ends with a parade in Pasadena. Begins with a football game and ends with a football game or any number of football games on those particular days. So in our nation we do celebrate a type of Christmas season. But while everyone is still jumping into Merry Christmas and the Christmas season and getting the Christmas trees on that first day after Thanksgiving and discarding them the day after Christmas, we as Catholics and Christians in general take a much slower pace. In many ways, pulling the reins on the secular society that, despite its intense generosity, is rushed to celebrate Christmas and rushed to end it. Because we begin Advent, not Christmas, but Advent. And while Advent ends with the celebration of Christmas, we don't delve right into a focus on Christmas in the first few days of Advent. As I had said, our Advent is not on the first coming of Christ. That's already happened. That's a point in history that we celebrate in Christmas. But our Advent is the second coming, waiting for Christ to come again. And those first few days of Advent are not focused or fixated on Christmas as yet. But we slow down and begin each liturgical year with the fact that we, year by year, day by day, wait in joyful hope for the coming of our Savior, Jesus Christ. And then, starting on the 17th of December, the octave of Christmas, we begin to shift that focus to preparing to celebrate the first coming of Christ. It's a certain point in Advent, and day by day our readings, and the Gospel especially, focus on the events in the Gospel that lead right into our celebration of Christmas as a people of God. It comes a little early this year because December 25th occurs on a Monday. So it's a trick question I always like to ask people, how long is Advent? And usually they answer 4 weeks. Actually, not entirely true. Because this year it's only 3 weeks. But it is 4 Sundays. 4 Sundays. And we will celebrate the 4th Sunday of Advent next Sunday, and Christmas is on the Monday. Just in case you're wondering, Christmas Eve Mass doesn't count for both. That question comes up every 6 or 7 years. But we celebrate in the Mass the 4th Sunday of Advent. And then we get into the vigil celebrations of Christmas. So keep that in mind. Every few years people ask that. And for all we know, many compensate by coming to the Saturday evening Mass. And we get a pretty decent crowd at the Saturday evening Mass. Others will come to Mass at their regular times and come to the Christmas Eve Mass or Christmas Day Mass. But this year we have, in the midst of the church slowing things down and taking it step by step, we do have a bit of a rush because Christmas comes just the day after the 4th Sunday of Advent. But even our celebrations of Christmas have a process to it. Some of you may know this, some of you may not, because many people have their traditions of how they celebrate Christmas. But the church actually has 4 different Masses that it celebrates on Christmas Day. And I'm not talking about Mass times, but 4 different celebrations that brings us in that process of the night before to the day of. We have the Vigil Mass. We have the Mass at midnight. Some places they have it at 9 p.m., but it's the midnight Mass. We have the Mass at dawn. And we have the Mass during the day. Each one with its own prayers. Each one with its own readings. Not even Easter has that. And no other feast has that. Because we think we're keeping vigil for that night before Christmas, before Jesus is born. Waiting as the star shows to the shepherds at midnight. Going to see the child at dawn after he is born. And then during the day reflecting upon the Word made flesh, as we'll hear portions of today's Gospel again on that Mass during the day. Even at Christmas we take it slow and we take it step by step. And for us, Christmas continues. It doesn't end, but it continues up until the 2nd Sunday after Christmas, when we celebrate Epiphany, when the Magi come to visit the infant Jesus. And so we're in the midst of that transition time in which we as a faith, in the midst of a social celebration of the holidays, a social celebration of Christmas, slow things down a little bit. Reflect upon the mysteries of our faith that lead us to this time of generosity. And hopefully sobers us to a certain degree to remember what this season is about. Because at times it can be and is forgotten that what we celebrate in this season is a feast day that comes from faith. Just last week, the news published a poll in which it showed that a low percentage in both ways, just in the 30 percentile range, like 35-36% of people in this country understand Christmas as a religious holiday. Not very many people. And only a few percentage points higher see it as a secular holiday. So actually more see it as a secular holiday, as a national holiday, than a religious holiday. And the vast majority either don't know or don't care. It's only that 30 percentile and a lower percentile see it as a religious holiday. And for us as a people of faith, it can be a challenge and perhaps something to consider in the coming few days as we go up into the celebration of Christmas. Because even in the midst of these secular preparations, we do every now and again hear news that sobers us up one way or the other to get us to truly appreciate what we have at a time of mass consumption, even in the midst of generosity. For example, the stories I hear on the news or articles I read of a young boy and joining the children who go to see Santa Claus, asking Santa if he could help his father get a job. Or the young child, the young daughter of a wounded warrior, a wounded veteran, who sitting on Santa's lap asked him if he could give her father his sight back. Or the boy who sat on Santa's lap, and when Santa said, "What do you want for Christmas?" he said, "All I want are fingers." And even stories like that sober us up as to what this season is all about, even in the secular world. But we as people of faith could also contribute to that greater awareness of the religiosity and the aspects of faith that we have during this season. And some can be done in very, very small ways, and others in very, very big ways. I'm not exactly sure how to do this, whether go from the big ways to the small ways, but examples you see every year on the news, every now and again they'll have a story of a family who teaches their kids, psyched the children up, got them prepared over time to say, well, this year we're not going to receive presents. This year as a family we're going to give presents to poor families, poor children, those in need. Now, of course, you look at the comments on the internet articles, and my gosh, you'd think these were the worst parents in the world. How could they mentally abuse their children in this way on a day in which they look forward to getting presents? But folks, I think we all know children can be pretty resilient when it comes to things like that, especially when parents prepare them for that. And while it might be a challenge, it's an experience they'll never forget on what they did to serve and to give to people in need on Christmas. On a smaller scale, it could be something as simple. I remember just the way my family, as I grew up, celebrated Christmas. I remember the movie A Christmas Story. How many remember A Christmas Story about Ralphie who wants his Red Ryder BB gun? And the portrayal is the kids come down on Christmas Day and immediately dive into the presents and start opening presents. You even see YouTube videos of families on Christmas Day. The kids go without any kind of reserve, go in and immediately start opening the first present they see with their names on it. And the way Ralphie tells it as a man, he says, "Christmas had come officially. Eagerly we delved into the cornucopia, quivering with desire and the ecstasy of unbridled avarice." I remember that, even growing up, because at least in my family, it's a tradition, not just in the immediate family, but the extended family, when aunts, uncles, and cousins got together to open presents, there was one person designated as Santa. He'd even put the Santa cap on and would distribute the presents, and no one would open a present until all of them were distributed. Try seeing little kids trying to hold it, waiting for all the presents to just be distributed before they open them. A kind of hesitation, or maybe like a grace before opening presents. An exercise of patience to see who is giving each present before they open it. Even in the religious sense of bringing a sense of what we're celebrating at this time, invariably on Christmas Eve, when do we see the crowds? We usually see the crowds Christmas Eve. Why? Because Christmas morning everyone's opening the presents. We even have a hard time getting altar servers at the early masses on Christmas Day. But I have known a couple of families in my years as a priest. Their practice is they wake up for the Mass at dawn. Mainly because the children are already awake. But the children awaken, and lo and behold, parents had made a few special arrangements. Santa hadn't come yet. They go to the early Mass. Some parishes it was 6:30, some 7, and the Mass at dawn. And as a family they go to Mass. And when they come home from Mass, guess who came while they were at church? And that association of Santa coming while they're at Mass celebrating the birth of Jesus. Little ways, medium-sized, big ways that we as a people of faith can enter into and approach this holiday for our nation and this sacred feast for us as church in ways that our children will never forget, and ways that can really drive home to the next generation of what we are celebrating as we prepare on this day, this December 17th, and going through this octave of Christmas day by day to the feast of Christ's birth. So let us come together on this third Sunday of Advent as we come as a people of great joy. Let us come together on the 17th day of December as we now shift our focus to how we can spend this week preparing to celebrate the birth of Jesus just a week and a day from today. And in the midst of the hustle and bustle of a secular celebration of Christmas, which in and of itself is a very good thing that our nation has, we can say in many ways, We Catholics do it a little better because we slow down and we reflect upon what it is we are celebrating and what it is that moves even our society to this period of such generosity and such joy. Because we come together to remember the first coming of Christ and to celebrate that as we await in joyful hope His second coming.